So this is intended to be a quick video to make the case for a feature request as raised by Milan Koronita or Microsoft 83 on GitHub, asking for attributes to be accessible within ESPHome, obviously from Home Assistant directly. A little quick bit of background: we have both been developing different software for these kind of devices, which is just a rotary encoder, an OLED screen, we've got a side button, but ultimately it's a D1 Mini underneath it. And in writing stuff for the ESPHome stuff, we've pretty much come across the same issue, which is that the ESPHome YAML is nice and easy to share with people as we've been testing it with various different people. However, the additional config that we're having to do within Home Assistant, i.e. template sensors to extract, as an example, in order to get the volume out of a media player, in order to have that as a function in a menu system or available on the screen, we're having to create a template sensor within Home Assistant, and that and all the complications that goes along with that. So, like, is it in the config file? Have they got a separate sensors file? Are they using packages? So where to paste this data becomes burdensome quite quickly. So as a quick example, this is Milan's menu configurator for the screen. Anybody familiar with ESPHome and know what all of this stuff up here is? Let's put in use a secret here. I'll just say Wi-Fi SSID. Take out the space, I can't type very well. Secrets Wi-Fi pass. The rest will keep the same. It's a D1 Mini. Because this is specifically one of these devices, we know what pin goes where, but if you need to change it, it's not specific to any device. You can use it across the board. It's a really open piece of software. It pre-configures some pins, but let's say on this one it's going to be a D1, D2. In fact, I will use loadouts. There we go. So automatically loaded that for me. Screensaver will ignore for now. That just gives you some actions when he's got a bouncing time thing in order to prevent burning on the OLED screen. So we've got some buttons. So when it's doing that, rather than waking it up, do you want the buttons to do something else? But for now, we'll just create a few menu items so we can see what this is actually doing. First item we'll create, we'll make it a continuous setting for volume. Let's say we'll do the media player option. We'll call it volume. Entity to change. Is there anything? Here we go. Media player volume. So he's got some custom stuff built in. So let's see what this one automatically does. I can see what he's doing with the display factor, etc., in order to get to convert it into a percentage. Let's say media player. Sorry, type properly. Media player, living room Sonos. Once volume, that should do. That's all we need to add. So we'll add another item. We'll make this a play and pause. So that would be binary settings, more of a plug. I think it would be an action button. We'll actually call it play pause. What to do, what to do, what to do. Restart. There we go. Media player, play pause. And again, we'll just copy and paste that one out. So there we go. I didn't mean to do that, but it shows you the service data as well. That's what it's actually going to put into the YAML. So this is obviously not a very big menu. One last thing. Let's put it. The submenu is where it gets really cool and powerful, because this is when you start being able to put down levels. So for instance, let's call this blinds, and the first thing in blinds might be a continuous thing, like a cover position. Let's see what we have in there. Do we have any covers? There we go, cover position. Entity to change would be a cover. I don't actually use blinds, so I'm making all of this up. We'll call it living room. That would do cover. No, we'll call it blinds. Anyway, and display factor to display and the amount of steps. Let's give it more steps, just so we have a different value in there. And then you could have another thing inside the blinds menu. In fact, I think I have to now that I've clicked that button, so we'll just quickly create an action button that does something random. Trigger an automation. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think that should error anyway. So now that we've got our menu, we can go down here and actually create it. So if we create the config, this is going to be the YAML that we just copy and paste straight into the ESPHome config. Nice and simple. Well, obviously the code itself isn't necessarily simple, but for the end user, you could even automate this and hide it from the end user eventually if we could make this kind of seamless and as smooth as we'd like to be. But this is the issue as we're trying to highlight. So in order to get some of these values, he's having to do a little bit of trickery with the template sensors. And they're all just obviously attributes from an object inside, or I'm not sure if it's an object, but within Home Assistant. If we could access these attributes directly, we wouldn't need to modify Home Assistant at all. Like, we just wouldn't need to touch it. We could do the entire software thing. And I say we because whilst I haven't written any of this software, I've written software using very similar processes, and I've come across exactly the same problem. In fact, example in my lighting controller here, this is the Pithy Screen ESPHome file. That's what we would copy and paste straight into the ESPHome. But we also need to go into, where is it? Home Assistant configuration. This is the changes that I need them to make inside Home Assistant 2. You don't need the icon, but ultimately it's exactly the same thing. We need to get the attribute, the color temperature from the object, and if I could remove this, then I can, because this is a separate config anyway, this is the bit that stops a lot of that. My testers, for instance, have always struggled with this bit, never the ESPHome stuff. That goes smoothly. This is the stuff that kicks it. So the wonderful thing about Milan software is that it's two-way, in as much as you can take your downloaded file and load it back into the config. It will populate all of this stuff. It will regenerate the menu. It'll know all of that things. Therefore you can add items, tweak items, delete items, whatever you want. But first, he needs to provide a dialog up here that appears once you upload the file, where you also need to copy in the template sensors from Home Assistant in order for it to do its magic. And ultimately, it's a step in the configuration that's unfortunate, but is necessary. With the system being as it is, if we could remove this step, i.e. no more template sensors, because we can just access the attributes directly, then this menu system becomes so much more accessible and user-friendly, and obviously it's all using ESPHome and Home Assistant. Anyway, that's the case such as I see it for attributes within ESPHome. That would be super useful. All right, thank you for your time.